On August 16, a tropical wave emerged off the west coast of Africa. That day, the National Hurricane Center (NHC) noted the potential that the system could eventually develop into a tropical cyclone, with its 5-day development potential estimated around 20%. By a day later, the NHC estimated a 50% chance that the wave would develop into a tropical cyclone within 5 days, and increased the development potential to 90% by August 18. By that time, a distinct low-pressure area developed within the wave, with rainbands located near the center, which were signs of a maturing weather system. On August 20, satellite imagery revealed that the system developed a defined low-level circulation center, LLCC, with convection firing up around it. As a result, the NHC began issuing advisories on Tropical Depression 13, while the system was located about 1,035 miles (1,670 kilometers) east-southeast of the northern Leeward Islands. On August 21, the hurricane hunters flew into the depression and observed gale-force winds. As a result, the NHC upgraded the depression to Tropical Storm Laura about 230 miles (375 kilometers) east-southeast of the northern Leeward Islands. This made Laura the earliest 12th named Atlantic storm, beating the previous record of Hurricane Luis of 1995 by 8 days. While crossing the Leeward Islands, Laura was poorly organized, with little thunderstorm activity near the center, poorly defined rainbands to the south, and well-defined outflow. The storm strengthened as it passed south of Puerto Rico, producing a large area of thunderstorms. Early on August 23, Laura made landfall near San Pedro de Macorís, Dominican Republic, with 45 miles per hour (72 kilometers per hour) winds. Later that day, Laura's center passed near Santo Domingo, the capital city of the Dominican Republic. While the storm crossed the island, the outflow and convective pattern improved. Later on August 23, Laura emerged from Haiti and crossed the Windward Passage, making a second landfall near Santiago de Cuba province, Cuba, as a mid-range tropical storm, with winds of 60 miles per hour (95 kilometers per hour) and a minimum central pressure of 1,000 millibars (29.53 nhg). The storm's structure degraded, losing its inner core of thunderstorms, and Laura made landfall in western Cuba in Pinar del Rio province around 0000 Coordinated Universal Time on August 25. The storm reorganized after it emerged into the Gulf of Mexico later that day. With light wind shear and the warm sea surface temperatures of the Gulf of Mexico, Laura began to quickly strengthen as it tracked west-northwestward away from Cuba, steered by a large ridge over the eastern United States, and a trough over central Texas. Its convective pattern evolved into a central dense overcast. At 12:15 Coordinated Universal Time on August 25, the NHC upgraded Laura to hurricane status, based on reports from the hurricane hunters. Later that day, the convection in the center began wrapping into a cloud-filled eye. On August 26, the hurricane's deep convection organized and became more symmetric, as the eye became clear and well-defined. Rapid intensification ensued as a result, and at 12 o'clock Coordinated Universal Time that day, Laura intensified into a major hurricane before reaching Category 4 strength just 6 hours later. At 1 o'clock Coordinated Universal Time on August 27, Laura reached a peak intensity of 150 miles per hour, 240 kilometers per hour, with a 937 millibars, 27.67 nhg pressure. 2 hours later, Laura's pressure began to fluctuate as it approached the Louisiana coastline. At 6 o'clock Coordinated Universal Time that same day, Laura made landfall near Cameron, Louisiana, with 150 miles per hour, 240 kilometers per hour winds and 938 mbars, 27.67 nhg of pressure. This tied Laura with the 1856 last island hurricane as the strongest cyclone on record to make landfall in Louisiana, based on maximum sustained wind speed. Laura began to weaken quickly after moving inland due to frictional displacement and shear created by the trough that caused Hurricane Marco to dissipate 2 days earlier. Laura weakened below tropical storm status, early on August 28 while over Arkansas. As of 7 p.m. Central Daylight Saving Time, 0000 Coordinated Universal Time, on August 27, Tropical Storm Laura is located within 20 nautical miles of 34.2 degrees north 92.4 degrees east, 34.2, 92.4 Laura, 35 miles, 55 kilometers south-southwest of Little Rock, Arkansas. Maximum sustained winds are 35 knots, 40 miles per hour, 65 kilometers per hour, with gusts up to 55 knots, 65 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour. The minimum barometric pressure is 992 millibars, 29.29 nhg, and the system is moving north-northeast at 13 knots, 15 miles per hour, 24 kilometers per hour. Tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 90 miles, 150 kilometers. For the latest official information, see the NHC's latest public advisory on Tropical Storm Laura, the NHC's latest forecast advisory on Tropical Storm Laura, the NHC's latest forecast discussion on Tropical Storm Laura. Tropical storm watches and warnings were issued for almost all of the Greater Antilles. In preparation for the storm, schools were closed in Anguilla and Antigua. A tropical storm watch was issued for several islands in the group on August 20, being upgraded to a warning the next day. The storm prompted the closing of all ports in the British Virgin Islands. A tropical storm warning from Punta Palenque to the northern Haitian border. A red alert was also issued for 18 provinces, a yellow alert for 8, and a green alert for 6. Haitian authorities urged people to evacuate to shelters, but to remember to wear masks and respect social distancing orders in the areas due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although the center of Laura was forecast to remain north of Jamaica, associated rainbands on the southern side of the circulation were anticipated to bring significant precipitation. On August 23, the Jamaican Meteorological Service issued a flash flood watch for low-lying areas nationwide. This was later upgraded to a flash flood warning on August 24 as torrential rains affected the nation. Originally, the bulk of the storm was forecasted to stay north of the Cayman Islands, but as the forecast kept on shifting further southwest of earlier forecast, the projections of significant precipitation and for tropical storm conditions continued to increase. The Cayman Islands government issued tropical storm warning for their islands on August 23. This was in addition to the severe weather statements and flood warnings that were already posted. Ahead of Laura's first landfall in Cuba on August 23, tropical storm watches and warnings were issued throughout the nation. At one point, the western tip of Cuba was under both a tropical storm watch from Laura and a tropical storm warning from Hurricane Marco at the same time. Officials evacuated 106,000 people in Santiago de Cuba province, 81,300 in Holguín province, and 12,000 in Guantánamo province. Power was preemptively cut across Guantánamo province as a precautionary measure. On August 24, a further 45,000 people in Villa Clara province, 16,466 people in Matanzas province, and 300 in Ciego de Ávila province were evacuated. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic complicated evacuation efforts, resulting in typical evacuation shelters such as schools not being opened. Those suspected of being infected were relocated to quarantine centers. Residents nationwide were alerted to the potential of widespread flooding as many reservoirs were at or near capacity. Hurricanes Marco and Laura threatened a large swath of oil rigs positioned across the Gulf of Mexico. By August 23, approximately 58% of oil production and 45% of natural gas production was shut down. This included the evacuation of 114 platforms. By August 25, 299 of 643 platforms and 27 of 28 mobile rigs were evacuated. 4 tornado watches were issued for this storm. They included the coastal waters as well as Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. The staff at the NWS Lake Charles office also evacuated, with warnings for their area being issued by NWS Brownsville. 3 rare extreme wind warnings were issued for Louisiana and Texas as Laura approached landfall. Puerto Rico Governor Wanda Vázquez declared a state of emergency, and FEMA teams were ready to help with recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. On August 21, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency for southern counties in the state. A mobile hospital unit was pre-staged in Marion County and personal protection equipment kits were readied for distribution to shelters. A tropical storm watch was issued for the Florida Keys as the storm approached, although the north side of the area was dropped when Laura went farther south than expected. The rest were eventually upgraded to warnings. The mayor of Monroe County, Heather Carruthers, declared a local state of emergency, and mandatory evacuations for mobile homes and boats, although visitors were allowed to stay. Hurricane, tropical storm, and storm surge watches were issued for areas mainly near and east of Galveston on August 24. Most were upgraded to warnings the next day, and a flash flood watch was also issued for the eastern portion of the state. On August 23, Texas Governor Greg Abbott declared a state of emergency for 23 counties in eastern Texas. On August 25, mandatory evacuation orders were issued for low-lying areas of Chambers, Galveston and Jefferson counties, and for the entirety of Orange County. This included the entirety of the Bolivar Peninsula and cities of Galveston and Port Arthur. Galveston city officials advised residents that all city services would cease at noon on August 25, and upon the arrival of tropical storm force winds, emergency services would be suspended. A total of 50 buses were used to assist in evacuations. A voluntary evacuation order was issued for coastal areas of Brazoria and Harris counties. An estimated 385,000 people were under evacuation orders in the state, including the entire city of Beaumont. Hurricane, tropical storm, and storm surge watches were issued for almost the entire coastline on August 24. This came just mere hours after the southeastern portion of the state had their tropical storm and storm surge warnings for Marco cancelled. Most of the watches were upgraded to warnings the next day, and a flash flood watch was also issued for the western half of the state as over 10 inches (25 centimeters) of rain was expected. As the threat of surge increased for the coastline, the NHC stated that there would be unsurvivable storm surge with large and destructive waves. On August 21, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards declared a state of emergency for 36 parishes due to the concurrent threat of hurricanes Marco and Laura. Evacuations related to Marco were in place for Plaquemines Parish, Jefferson Parish, Grand Isle, and Port Fortune. A mandatory evacuation for the entirety of Calcasieu Parish, approximately 200,000 people, was ordered on August 25. State-run shelters were opened with cots spread farther apart due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just hours before Laura made landfall on August 26, I-10 was shut down in both directions between the Louisiana-Texas border eastward to the Atchafalaya Basin. Despite being well away from the center of the storm, the coastline of Mississippi was placed under a storm surge watch from Ocean Springs westward on August 24 due to the massive size of Laura. However, these were dropped before the storm made landfall. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves declared a state of emergency on August 22 due to both hurricanes Laura and Marco threatening the state, which the federal government granted on August 24. President Donald Trump declared a state of emergency for the state of Arkansas. As Laura passed through the Leeward Islands, the storm brought heavy rainfall to the islands of Guadeloupe and Dominica, which was captured on radar imagery from Guadeloupe. In the Netherlands Antilles, Saba, Sint Eustatius, and Sint Maarten saw minor flooding. Scattered power outages affected 4,000 people in St. Kitts and Nevis. In the Virgin Islands, a peak wind gust of 41 miles per hour (65 kilometers per hour) was reported in Sandy Point, St. Croix. It caused some power outages and flash flooding across the Virgin Islands. Tropical storm Laura brought damaging winds and flooding rains to much of the Dominican Republic. Precipitation was heaviest along the southern coast, with a peak 24-hour accumulation of 11.7 in 300 mm in Barahona. Approximately 1.1 million people lost power while 1.56 million people experienced disruption to water services. Early assessments as of August 24 indicated significant damage to 1,791 homes, prompting the evacuation of 8,995 people. In Santo Domingo, a woman and son died after their house collapsed, due to the rain brought by Laura, and in Pedro Brand, a man died when a tree fell on his house. Severe flooding was reported across Santo Domingo. A police officer lost his life after falling on a downed electric cable in the Elias Piña province. Similar to the Dominican Republic, heavy precipitation affected much of Haiti. A personal weather station in Port-au-Prince measured 6.61 in 168 mm of rain. Extensive flooding affected the nation, forcing many families to evacuate their homes. As of August 25, at least 21 people were confirmed dead with another 5 missing. The Peligre Dam overflowed, sending floodwaters down the Artibonite Valley. Public Works Minister Nader Joasius alerted residents that the dam could collapse. Agriculture suffered significant damage as the nation struggled with COVID-19-related food shortages. Flooding damaged 447 homes and destroyed 15 others across the Artibonite department. After clearing Hispaniola, Tropical storm Laura brought damaging winds and flooding rains to southeastern Cuba on August 23–24. Wind gusts reached 91 miles per hour (146 kilometers per hour) in Maicí, tearing roofs off homes and downing trees. Rainfall reached 9.51 in 241.5 mm in Complejo Palma, Santiago de Cuba, and 7.50 in 190.6 mm in San Antonio del Sur, Guantánamo. Damage across Holguín province was relatively limited. Some structures and crops were damaged and scattered power outages occurred. A bridge in Buey Arriba, Granma province, collapsed due to flooding, which isolated 30 communities. A station in Cabo Cruz recorded sustained winds of 50 miles per hour, 80 kilometers per hour, and a gust of 65 miles per hour, 104 kilometers per hour. Minor flooding and power outages occurred in Las Tunas province. Flash flooding across Jamaica caused significant disruptions to road infrastructure. A weather station in Negril observed 4.97 in 126 mm of rain. A landslide blocked the main road to Gordon Town. Unstable terrain hampered efforts to clear debris. A bridge in St. Thomas Parish was washed away, isolating residents of Trinityville, Georgia, and Cedar Valley. Additionally, the main road connecting Pepin to Dallas Castle in Bull Bay collapsed. Wind gusts reached 35 to 40 miles per hour, 56 to 64 kilometers per hour along southern coastlines near Kingston and in Montego Bay on the country's north coast. Initial damage estimates totaled to around 54 million Jamaican dollars, 360,000 United States dollars, according to Jamaica's National Works Agency (NWA). Rounds of gusty winds and heavy rainfall affected the Cayman Islands as Laura passed just to the north. In Puerto Rico, Laura downed trees and caused flooding in Salinas. Part of the Salinas city sign was also blown over during the storm. A peak of 4.09 in 104 mm of precipitation was reported in Villalba, with a peak wind gust of 75 miles per hour, 121 km per hour being reported in Salinas. Roughly 200,000 customers lost power in Puerto Rico, with nearly 14,000 losing access to running water. Tropical storm force wind gusts affected several counties across southern Florida, particularly Collier, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties. A gust of 65 miles per hour, 105 kilometers per hour was observed at the Turkey Point nuclear generating station. Farther south, a strong squall line moved through Key West, damaging streetlights and generating a 69 miles per hour, 111 kilometers per hour wind gust at the National Weather Service's Key West office. On August 25, a St. George Island first responder drowned while trying to rescue a swimmer caught in rough surf. Numerous tornado warnings began to be issued throughout Louisiana as Laura approached the coast on August 26. One tornado was reported by the public in Paincourtville, Louisiana, although no damage occurred. Another tornado was spotted by a train spotter in Bell City, Louisiana. Coastal water rises began at around 1900 Coordinated Universal Time on August 26. The first report of sustained tropical storm force winds on land was at Cypremort Point, on Vermilion Bay, where 45 miles per hour (72 kilometers per hour) winds were recorded. Intracoastal City saw a storm surge of 6 feet (1.8 meters). Storm surge flooding also overshish 317 at Burns Point in St. Mary Parish. Near the landfall point in Cameron, a wind gust of 127 miles per hour (204 kilometers per hour) was recorded at Calcasieu Pass, which saw at least 9.19 feet (2.80 meters) of storm surge. Holly Beach was extensively damaged as an RV was destroyed and several homes suffered roof damage. Storm surge flooding also covered Shish 82. Widespread power outages were recorded near the landfall point as well. In Lake Charles, numerous trees were blown down and another RV was blown over. The Lake Charles Regional Airport saw a wind gust of 128 miles per hour (206 kilometers per hour) as well as multiple hangars destroyed. Another wind gust in the city reached 137 miles per hour (220 kilometers per hour). There were numerous social media reports and videos of windows blown out of the Capital One Tower in downtown Lake Charles. A communications tower collapsed onto the KPLC studio building, which had been evacuated ahead of the storm, and a portion of a skybridge was blown out. The radar at the NWS Lake Charles forecast office, which had its staff evacuate in advance of the storm, and the office's operations being transferred in the interim to the NWS office in Brownsville, Texas, was destroyed around the time of landfall, with its dome and much of its internal equipment sheared from the radar tower's base. Farrar Hall at McNeese State University also suffered damage, and a Motel 6 building partially collapsed. A chlorine leak has caused a large chemical fire on the west side of Lake Charles. Elsewhere, power flashes were seen in Sulphur, where a hotel was damaged. Extensive structural damage also occurred in Vinton, and a salon was destroyed in Westlake. Softwood trees were blown down on Fort Polk and the roof of home collapsed in Alexandria after a tree fell on it. A home in Carlis had its roof and entire back room ripped off while another home was damaged in New Llano after a carport was blown into it. There was extensive damage to trees, power lines and poles, and structures in De Quincy, and much of the town of Delcombre was left underwater due to flooding. The roof of a market basket store in Welsh and Hicks High School in LeCamp was blown off. A tree was blown down onto a fraternity house in Lafayette. Further inland, a mesonet near Calvin measured a wind gust of 70 miles per hour (110 kilometers per hour). Trees and power lines were blown down all over the cities of Mansfield and Shreveport. In the latter city, a tree fell on a house, injuring a person inside while another tree fell on a vehicle. Multiple roads throughout Shreveport had to be closed due to the widespread tree damage. In Monroe, trees and parking light poles were downed and metal roofing was blown off of multiple buildings. Widespread flooding was reported in Natchitoches Parish, where I-49 had to be closed past Shish 174 west of Powhatan due to a downed tree. In Natchitoches, utility poles were snapped and broken and power lines were blown down on a business on Shish 1. The police station in Robeline had its roof ripped off to go with the numerous downing of large trees throughout the town. Near Bossier City, a large tree was blown down on the Centenary College of Louisiana campus while several homes were damaged by falling trees south-southwest of the city. In Greenwood, flash flooding led to high water over the shoulder roads of I-20 at Exit 5 with drivers being advised to use US 80 as an alternative. In Jena, multiple trees were blown down on homes and vehicles and power lines were downed all over town. Falling trees have led to 4 fatalities in the state. They included a 14-year-old girl in Vernon Parish, a 60-year-old man in Acadia Parish, a person in Jackson Parish, and another person elsewhere in the state. A 24-year-old man died from carbon monoxide poisoning from a generator inside his home. A man died of drowning while aboard a sinking boat. One person was killed and another injured after rough surf from Laura slammed them against jetties in Corpus Christi on August 26. Eastern Texas saw a few tornado warnings as Laura neared landfall on August 26 as well. Coastal water rises in the southeast part of the state began at around 2000 Coordinated Universal Time that same day. Wind gusts in both Houston and Galveston peaked at 38 miles per hour (61 kilometers per hour). A wind gust of 79 miles per hour (127 kilometers per hour) was recorded at Kirbyville Raw's site near Call, and trees were downed in groves. In Port Arthur, trees were downed, including one that fell on a house, and a parking lot lamp snap at its base. A large tree also fell on and damaged a house in Beaumont. Structural damage occurred in near Pinehurst just west of Orange, where multiple trees and power lines were downed and several structures, including a church, were damaged. Structural damage also occurred in Bridge City. More trees and power lines were blown down across both Angelina and Sabine counties, some of which blocked roads. In Hemphill, a roof collapsed at an Ashley home store and multiple roads were blocked by falling trees. A man was killed northeast of town when a tree fell on him while he was sitting on a recliner in his home. Southeast of the city, trees fell on homes and blocked all exits in the McGee's Landing area. East of Center, a tree and power lines fell on FM 417 and FM 2694. Despite the reduced surge threat on the coast, Mississippi still faced the threat of tornadoes from the storm, especially on the western side of the state. A number of tornado warnings were issued for parts of the state starting on August 26. Widespread flash flooding occurred across Jefferson-Davis County. In Natchez, trees were blown down and a sign at an AutoZone damaged 6 vehicles when it was blown down. A tree was also blown down on a house in Warrenton. Numerous tornado warnings were issued in Arkansas, and 2 tornadoes have been reported. One tornado caused significant damage to a church in Lake City. At 9:38 p.m. Central Daylight Saving Time, a large and extremely dangerous tornado was confirmed over Evening Star. A 57 miles per hour (92 kilometers per hour) wind gust was recorded just south of El Dorado while trees and power lines were downed, including 2 trees that fell on houses throughout the town, which was one of many to lose power in Union County. Numerous trees were downed in the Doddridge area, including one on US 71, causing numerous power outage. South of Bradley near the Louisiana-Arkansas state line, a tree fell on R-29, blocking the road. R-343 was shut down between Louisville and R-53 due to falling trees. Trees were downed on power lines in Dermott and a barn also had its roof removed in Wilmot. Trees and power lines were downed across a widespread area in several counties. In the town of Camden, where numerous trees were blown down, including that fell on a house, and a metal roof was blown off a shop building. Downed trees were also reported in Sheridan and power poles were snapped along US 67 northeast of Caddo Valley. Eastbound I-30 was shut down west of Hope at mile marker 26 due to downed tree blocking both lanes of the freeway. In Kingsland, several large trees were blown down, including one that significantly damaged a house. In Goodrich, a house carport was destroyed with a hole through its wall. Following the passage of Laura, Haiti's Directorate General of Civil Protection, DGCP, began damage assessments. The agency quickly distributed food kits to affected residents in the West, Nipis, Sud-Est, and Sud departments. Water treatment products were sent to Anse-et-Pitres and Belle-Anse by the National Directorate for Drinking Water and Sanitation. The World Health Organization (WHO) and Pan American Health Organization (PAHO) deployed medical teams across the country to assist the Haitian National Red Cross Society, though transport of victims was hampered by limited access to ambulances. 11 schools were converted to shelters. However, many evacuees opted to stay with neighbors or relatives due to fears of COVID-19.